Well, I hope you slept well.
It was great.
Yeah?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Actually,
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years' experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. President Donald Trump has been making headlines once again this week, and although a lot of the reasons are political, which we don't cover on the channel, there have been two things that have happened that have a lot of psychological and behavioral elements to them. One of them is his ongoing little spat with Elon Musk, and although we covered some of that on the channel just this week while he was right outside the White House, he was asked some questions about it and had some very interesting answers. The second viral moment that's being talked about everywhere happened in the Netherlands when Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, while having an interaction with Donald Trump, turned around and made an expression that the headlines and viewers all over the world are calling a mockery of Donald Trump. But what do the body language, facial expressions, and word choice actually suggest? How does he feel towards Elon Musk? And was that gesture actually her mocking the President of the United States? Let's dive right in. All right, let's start with the whole Donald Trump versus Elon Musk conflict. So a couple of weeks ago, we covered this on the channel, things got really nasty when Musk took to X and wrote some very serious accusations about Donald Trump. He later took those down. He said that he regretted posting those and that they went too far. And we covered an interview where Donald Trump was asked some questions about Elon Musk, and we saw a little bit that that relationship was fractured. Well, just last week, things started to get a little tense again, as Elon Musk, once again on X, started criticizing Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. But this time there was a bit of a counterbalance because a few days ago, he also wrote a positive post. He said, "Credit where credit is due, real Donald Trump has successfully resolved several serious conflicts around the world." And it seems like that nuanced opinion is mutual because although Donald Trump said that Musk's posts were inappropriate, and he said a couple of things that we're about to look at that are sort of a warning sign to Elon Musk, he also, in an interview with Fox News, had some very nice things to say about Elon Musk and the help that he provided during the campaign as well. So it's a very hot and cold moment between Donald Trump and Elon Musk right now. And that brings us to the clips that we're looking at today. So just a few days ago, as he was on the lawn of the White House on his way out, he was asked some questions by the press about Elon Musk. And his responses were such a great example of how sometimes our behaviors, demeanor, and word choice can give away quite a bit about how we feel towards certain people. And my special guest and I are going to dive into those clips right now. To help us go through some of these clips, please welcome back to the channel a retired US military chief who is the #1 best-selling author on the subjects of body language, persuasion, and profiling. Everybody say hi to Mr. Chase Hughes.
What up?
Sup?
Let's do this, man. These videos are insane. You sent them to me about 45 minutes ago, and I had a look. This is going to be epic.
Let's go.
What happened to Elon Musk?
Who?
What happened to Elon Musk?
Nothing. He's upset that he's losing his EV mandate, and he's very upset about things, but he could lose a lot more than that. I can tell you right now. Hey, Elon can lose a lot more than that.
All right, Chase. So he's asked about Elon Musk right here for the first time. He's going to be asked twice about Elon Musk. And in his answer, we're seeing some interesting body language, but also some interesting psychology in the power dynamic. So walk us through what are some of the things that we're seeing here in his communication style.
Overall, we're seeing a lot of really baseline behaviors. Just talking with his head tilted when he's making kind of threats. He's walking without swinging his arms too much. And we see a lot of other things that are very, very much in his baseline. And one of those is especially like him kind of looking away like this and talking at the same time. You see this in almost every speech that he's ever done. So we see a lot of baseline behavior here. It's just loaded with it.
Yeah, it's funny because in psychology we have something called taffy eyes, which is like when you pull the head away but the eyes stay on the person for 1 extra second to kind of make it seem like your attention is fleeting. He does like taffy head. So we see it here, like you said, very clearly, where the body turns away, like you're losing my attention, but the head is here just throwing in this one last comment. And that has a psychological effect on the person. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So if we talk about this in body language training all the time, if a person's feet start pointing towards the door, that's their intent, right? And we can reverse engineer this. When a person's body starts facing away and their head is facing away, they're doing an unconscious signal. Maybe they're doing it on purpose or not, but they're sending a signal to the other person unconsciously that creates a feeling of scarcity of time. Like, I only have a few seconds left of this person's attention. So we see that definitely here in this clip. This is called ventral orientation. If you're a body language nerd, where is their body pointed? And if our body is pointing another way while we're having a conversation, that means our interest and our intent is in another direction. So this increases scarcity.
Beautifully said. So do you want to talk about specifically what he's saying in that moment as the attention is going away? Because in his words here, we're getting some interesting stuff as well. So why don't you cover that as well?
Yeah, I think the behavior here is louder, much louder than the body language, in my opinion. The reference to him with first name only, he does this when he wants to make it seem really, really informal. Either I know this person really well, or they're not important. It could be either one of those things. But he has this classic power play of capacity and possibility for damage is what I frame it as. And this is something that he's done all the way back to the 1980s. So it's nothing new. So he tends to speak in his capacity for harm and the things that he could do, but is choosing not to do. And we definitely are seeing that here.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think that's why it's making the headlines, because they were very close for a while, and now he's turning that on him. And he's even going to use language, we're about to see it in a second, that suggests that as well. And there's a mocking tone there. Like, it's not like, yes, it's lighthearted, but there's a threat there that's happening. And he's saying, let me tell you, Elon could lose a lot more than that. So it's like, don't push me, because there's a tipping point. There's something that you said about using names that I find really interesting, and it reflects what we see in society as well. So because he's the president, it's unlikely that anybody on the news is going to call him by his first name. Nobody's going to call him Donald. It would be very inappropriate because he's the president. So it's either President Trump, sometimes Trump, a lot of people just say Trump, or Donald Trump, the whole name. So you're right. When he says Elon, that's informal. Either I know this person or I'm above this person. And if we look in society, people above get titles and people below get the first name used. So like in school, the teacher is Miss this, Mrs. that, Mr. this, but the kids are referred to by their first name. It's the same in royalty, right? That's what titles are. Titles denote prestige or higher up in the ranks. So it's interesting how he can call Elon, but Elon wouldn't be able to go on the news and call him Donald. It really wouldn't sound right to anybody. So, and also, there's also something interesting that you've told me that you've noticed about his use of just last names. So not Mr. something, but just last names. Can you touch on that? I find that so fascinating.
Yeah, for Trump's baseline especially, and us as a culture, you can see some reflection of this. But for Trump's baseline as a person, when he really disrespects a person, he uses their last name only. And you've heard him say Schiff or Comey or Fauci when he's talking about these people. So when he really doesn't like somebody, he definitely uses these last names. He doesn't say Omar al-Baghdadi. He just says Baghdadi. So he tends to do this very frequently. So this may reflect that there's still some feelings there, and maybe it's meaningless, but he did use Elon's first name.
Yeah, which is like my good pal Elon, you know? So it's interesting to look at that because, yeah, if he was like Musk, that does have a certain element of disconnect there.
Yeah.
It reminds me of in high school. You know how in high school there was always that one kid that everyone called by the last name, and everyone just used just the kid's last name to refer to him.
Yep. I had a guy named Coleman.
Yeah, Cool. Yeah, so classic. Why does it always end with men? Hey, Coleman, what you got there, Coleman? That was one of those.
Yep.
There's an interesting little cluster that we see of behaviors when he's first asked about Elon Musk, where he says, who? And then the reporter goes, Elon Musk, what's going on with that? And we see enough gestures that together constitute a shrug. So we see the hands open up like this as they go up really quickly, and the mouth goes into a quick mouth shrug, this lifted compression, and the head just kind of goes sideways like this. So the research on shrugging shows that it usually denotes a disengagement or a lack of something. I don't something. But this is something we often see with Trump before he answers a question. So do you want to talk about what that might suggest?
So I think a shrug, if it's with both shoulders, is an apology in a social way. So like, I'm sorry, I don't know, or I don't know what to do about it. It's kind of a social apology is how I look at it. But with this head shake and this kind of dismissive gesture, we see him do the exact same thing when they asked him about his estate at Mar-a-Lago being raided, when they asked him about his taxes and other things that were kind of out of his control, and no longer, he had no more dominion over those things. So we definitely see it in those areas where he's done with something, or he's done feeling like he's in control of something.
Wow, that's great. So possibly in this case, like I don't know, it's really not in my hands right now. Maybe he feels like Elon's the one that's continuing this grudge. So he's like, I don't know, really not much to say there. I don't really know what's going on with that. And kind of wants to move on from that conversation. Love it. So one last thing before we move on from that clip. I noticed something really interesting in the first second of this. So the reporter says, what's going on with Elon Musk? And Trump answers, who? And I thought that was really interesting. So if you really think about this, when he's saying who, clearly he didn't hear a part of the question. But my question to the viewer is, what part of the question didn't he hear? So Chase, you know where I'm going with this. It's loud there, right? We know even when he steps away a little bit, we already can't hear him, and there's a helicopter there. There's obviously a lot of noise. So it's fine. I totally accept that there's a part of the question he didn't hear. But usually when we don't hear an entire question, we go, excuse me, or can you repeat that, or what? I'm sorry, what? Not who. So he has some kind of knowledge that the question was about a person. That's why you would say who. So maybe he heard what's going on with, but even if you heard that, you go, I'm sorry, with what? Because you would assume it's about a bill, a policy, something like that. So it's so interesting to me that he said who.
What happened to Elon Musk? Who? What happened to Elon Musk?
Did he hear the question or did he not hear the question? So there's only two possibilities. Possibility one is that he's saying who almost again as a power dynamic. Like who are you talking about? Almost like to make the guy repeat it, like Elon Musk, oh, that guy, kind of like that. Almost going with the dismissiveness of that shrug, like you pointed out. The second possibility is that he thinks he heard Elon Musk. He's just not 100% sure. So he wants to confirm that. And so he's going, wait, did I hear that right? Who? And he's letting it slip with the who that he may have heard Elon Musk. It's either one of those two things, but I thought it was so interesting that he's saying who rather than what. So, which means he understood or heard more of the question than he's leading on to believe.
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible? He gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. But Elon's very upset that the EV mandate is going to be terminated. And you know what? When you look at it, not everybody wants an electric car. I don't want an electric car. I want to have maybe gasoline, maybe electric, maybe a hybrid, maybe someday a hydrogen. If you have a hydrogen car, it has one problem, it blows up, So I'm going to give that one to Peter. I'm going to let Peter test it out. The hydrogen cars, and when they blow up, it's serious. They find you 5 blocks away. It's that good.
For those of you who didn't see this interview, I want to preface it by saying that right off the bat, he's in a better mood than some of the last ones that we saw. Obviously, lately there's been a lot of tension. He's been talking about a lot of conflicts overseas. So in the last one that we covered, he came out and he was in an angry, sort of more serious demeanor. Here from the get-go, he came out, he addressed them, good morning, he had a pleasant tone, a little bit of joking here and there. But here we're seeing almost like a pretty noticeable shift towards something that he's done a few times before. So Chase, walk us through what we're seeing there.
Most of this clip, he's on baseline. So he makes the shift. And the one shift that he makes here is into his Jerry Seinfeld comedy mode here. And he loves winning over a crowd. He loves talking to the crowd. And he loves that when people reflect back, like that they understand, they're nodding along. But he only loves it when he's doing the comedy stuff. If he's saying something negative, he doesn't give a crap what anybody is thinking out there. But when he loves being funny in front of a crowd, when he enters this comedy mode, you can see him doing social approval checking. So he doesn't do this at any other time, but when he cracks a joke or says something that he needs approval for, you'll see him check 3 or 4 different reporters to make sure that they're laughing at his behavior or at his performance. And that is what we're seeing here for sure, outside of baseline, sort of.
I love that you said that. I love that you said Seinfeld specifically, because this reminds me exactly of a clip where he was once during a speech talking about paper straws, and somebody took that and put the Seinfeld music over it, and it looked like an opening sequence from the Seinfeld show when he's doing the comedy. And not only does he check in with the audience, but even brings them into the bit. In this case, he referenced one of the reporters. He said, maybe we'll get you one of those cars. So even before he went into the comedy, he referenced one of the reporters. He said he gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. So he's not only, like you said, looking at the crowd, but he's pulling them into, for lack of better words, the comedy bit. You're absolutely right about that.
He gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. If you have a hydrogen car, it has one problem, it blows up, So I'm going to give that one to Peter.
Another interesting thing here is that he's really dancing on that line of be careful. We're not in threat territory yet. And if we look at his use of language, we see that. Because if we look at the language, he's saying Doge is the monster that might have to go back to Elon. Because Elon worked on Doge for a while and, he was quite proud of it at the time. But he's saying it might have to go back to Elon. And even in the first one, he says, we may have to put Doge on Elon. So Chase, can you take a second to talk about may or might versus will, and that kind of threat assessment? Because, you spend a lot of time studying threat assessment.
Yeah. So he uses may as just the tactic we talked about. This is his veiled threat strategy. Let me just do a threat of possibility and potential. He knows that the media is going to explode on everything, and he has trained himself to be ready for deposition. So everything that he says is made to be innocent in a deposition if he's ever deposed about any of this.
Okay, so that was the whole Elon Musk and Donald Trump thing. Now let's go to the Queen Maxima thing, which I got so many requests, people asking me what is this? What is she doing? What's going on? So let's talk about it. So this moment took place in the Netherlands just before the NATO summit earlier this week at the Huis ten Bosch. And I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but it's one of the royal palaces in the Netherlands. And in the video, we see Queen Maxima and her husband, King Willem-Alexander of the Netherlands, walking around with Trump, and he had stayed with them. And apparently, from what I read, this is the first time a US president has stayed at the house of the King and Queen of the Netherlands. So they were walking around with him, and we could see the King exchanging pleasantries with Donald Trump, and Queen Maxima is participating as well. They're being gracious, they're being welcoming, and at some point she turns to the camera and does a mouth gesture that is very commonly associated with Donald Trump.
Well, I hope you slept well.
It was great.
Yeah?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. But actually, I was going to tell you.
So it's this pucker of the lips that's very much part of his baseline when he talks, and is also something that we often see comedians or impersonators do when they're doing an impression of Donald Trump. So it's something that a lot of people immediately recognized as something that he does, and she's just turning to the cameras and doing it herself. And this confused a lot of people. Was this mockery? Was she openly mocking the US president that was there to visit? Or was it just this random gesture out of nowhere? A lot of media sources and commenters on social media refuse to believe that this could be coincidental, and this has to be some kind of mockery or reference to Donald Trump. Now, I will say this. She did make an official statement saying that she was not mocking him, that she was simply saying thank you to some of the people in the room. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, but that is her official statement. So Chase and I now are going to take a very close look at that moment and tell you exactly what we think it is and why we think it's exactly that thing. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content. Okay, so the famous puckering of the lips by Queen Maxima, this is all over the news, all kinds of split theories about it. And so Chase, you and I instantly agreed on this and independently agreed on this. And I think it has a little bit to do with our studies in persuasion and hypnosis and that field. But the internet is split over, was this just a random gesture? That was option A, which is random thing, it's meaningless. Then there's a big chunk of people on the other side saying, no, this was purposeful and she was mocking him. But you and I thought that it was something else, a third option. Do you want to talk about what we believe this to be?
Yeah, so I think if you just look at her character and her background, she's extremely open. She's very social. And she grew up in Argentina. She was born in Argentina. And she's also trilingual, I think, if I remember correctly. She's not in the news very much. And I looked today, I don't know her very well, but I looked today for any history of her ever doing anything remotely like this. And there is nothing. So one thing that we see in this video is she's open and she's very social. We know this about her behavior, but her head is in front of her heart in the conversation. She's leaning forward and her mouth is open while looking at another person's face. So when those two things line up, the head is in front of the heart a little bit and the mouth is open and you're looking at another person's face, you can guarantee there are mirror neurons lighting up in that person's brain that make us almost mimic that person's feelings, their emotions that they're going through, and like it makes empathy almost skyrocket. That's what mirror neurons are supposed to do, so we can take care of our fellow tribe members and stuff. But we also, I don't think this was an act of defiance. I think she would not be showing this much behavioral deference to Trump, because right after she does that lip movement, there's a rapid head movement back toward Trump. If this was defiant, it would have been slow and less respectful. And we see that every time somebody's defiant, they don't turn their head back immediately to look at the other person. And we just don't see it. She's incredibly social, probably has a lot more empathy than most people in politics if you just watch some of her interviews. And a person with a multilingual background, let's talk about this really quick. A person with a multilingual background and close attention to linguistic nuance throughout her whole life, this probably was a huge factor in this as well. So it's probably a reflex that she had there. And it's a reflex from living in these different countries, learning these different languages. You get really good at unconsciously mimicking mouth movements and linguistic style elements. And it just, the mean-spirited part of this does not fit her personality to me at all.
100% agreed. And I think there's even a few more cues for this. So when we're going to mock someone, the first thing we do is we look for our audience, right? So Chase, if you were doing something that I wanted to mock, and I know that it's something that I've talked about with some of my friends or my family or whoever's around us, I'd make eye contact with them first. There would be a quick little expression of like, there he goes again, and then I would go to that mockery. It wouldn't be instant. It wouldn't be like almost this quick reflex, which we see with her. What are you laughing at? What are you laughing at?
Your head wobble was perfect. I love it.
The second thing is, you said that she's in mimic mode, and we have evidence of that. Because just before that, her husband is speaking to Trump. I hope you enjoyed your stay. I hope you're comfortable. And she's already following his cue. Yeah, like kind of echoing his sentiment. So we see it in her body. And you're right, she's leaned in, mouth open. She's following these cues.
Well, I hope you slept well.
It was great.
Yeah?
Thank you all very much.
So what I think is most likely is that whether she has previously in a private conversation kind of, done that mouth thing, maybe with some friends, or she's seen someone do it, or if you watch anyone imitating Trump ever, comedians, impersonators, anyone, they all do that mouth thing. So, and it's noticeable. It is the way his mouth moves. So whether it's something she's seen before someone else do, or she's talked about it before, or she's seeing it for the first time, I think you're dead on. I think as she turned away, her mouth just unconsciously mimicked the way he speaks. And I love your point about someone who's learned different languages, because they pay a lot of attention and mimic the shape of the mouth and the phonetics and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't think it's this purposeful mockery. And the other thing that supports that is, why put on a mask that entire time, be show him that attention, be nice. I hope you enjoyed your stay, be very welcoming. And at that one moment, decide to very obviously mock him like that. It's off baseline. It wouldn't make sense.
And I think there's a chance that she's saying thank you. Like you can see her making almost a TH sound as she's turning around, like she's saying thank you 3 times.
To me, it looks like she's saying le le le. But I don't think.
Right. But I think she's subconsciously going through what she would normally say if she was the only person in the room.
Right, that's a good point. So almost like mouthing, thank you, thank you, thank you. Another thing I want to point out is for us to say that this isn't mimicry or it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. First of all, like you said, we look at her baseline. I have watched hours of interviews of this woman, everything I could find online. I have never seen her mouth, unless she's making the O sound, which we all pucker when we say O. She doesn't go into this puckering with the bottom teeth. So you're absolutely right on that. But to say that this isn't related to him, we would have to find a category of movement that this falls into. So this is a fun little takeaway for the viewers. We're gonna go through all the categories of gestures that we see in body language to see if this fits any of them. Because if it's random, then it would have to be one of these. So Chase, we'll just go back and forth. You could start with any family of gestures. Go ahead.
Sure, let's start with illustrators. When you just use the word gestures, this is an illustrator to illustrate your point. I'm not signaling that what I'm doing right here is a gesture, but it is an illustration of something that's going on. So here's why the mouth movement was not an illustrator. This was not meant to accentuate a point or to communicate something that's otherwise being spoken about or to help somebody understand a point. So I used illustrators to do that. What do you got?
Not to mention, illustrators are often, maybe with the eyebrows you illustrate, maybe with your head, maybe with your hands. We rarely illustrate with our mouth because we're using the mouth to speak at the moment. I'll do emblems. So emblems are gestures that replace words, and they're different all over the world, right? In America, for example, this, like a thumbs up, is a good thing. It's excellent, or this is the same. There are parts of the world where this isn't as positive when you make a circle with the hand like this. But in America or in the Western culture, these are positive things. If I hold up my middle finger, that's an emblem for a negative thing. So emblems are gestures that socially we accept that they replace a word. I don't know that puckering of the lips is an emblem at all. Doesn't fit that category, unless somebody from the Netherlands comes out and goes, oh no, when we do that with the lips, it signifies something. But again, we've never seen her do this, so not an emblem. Next, Chase.
Next, we move into narrators. And a narrator is like an illustrator, except it's actually designed to make someone think about something with the movement. So like if I say I went fishing and I caught this fish, I'm narrating the size of this thing. If I say I was in a car accident and I got hit from behind and I do that with my head, I'm narrating this. I'm using my body to narrate the story. So she is not conveying a message with this movement or trying to convey any kind of meaning with the movement that you're seeing here in this clip. What else?
Yeah. Next, we have regulators. So regulators just help us kind of direct the conversation, right? So if I'm talking and I go, what do you think? Or, my hand might come out to be like, this kind of thing. It's not a regulator, plain and simple. I don't think anybody could think it's that. Next.
Then we have adapters. And adapters are things we do to kind of increase the placebo that we've got some control over the environment or the situation here. I might fiddle with buttons on my shirt or kind of straighten my collar or organize things on the desk around me, sit up in my chair, lean forward to speak to somebody. And this is adapting. I'm trying to shift something around me or my environment that gives me a little bit more control or a little bit of at least a placebo of control. And the reason that this is not that is she's facing away from the person. The only person that someone would want to feel like, oh, I'm in charge of this person, or I'm dominating this person, and immediately looks back to Trump after the gesture.
Yeah. Also, not to mention adapters, which, by the way, in the research have a lot of names: adapters, pacifiers, manipulators, self-soothing gestures. Have a repetitive massage-like gesture a lot of the time. And they're often repetitive. So even if there's that leaning forward, there's a bit of a rocking involved, a bit of a massaging involved, this kind of thing. So no, this isn't an adapter. We're usually adapting to some input, some stress, something like that. It's not an adapter. We do adapt with the mouth sometimes, like the tongue might do something like this, but it does not look like an adapter. Finally, we have, a big broad family, which is displays of emotion. So whether it's the eyes opening up and the eyebrows coming down in anger, or the eyebrows going up in sadness, or the mouth drooping in sadness, or any display of any emotion, any subconscious display of how you're feeling at the moment, whether it's scared, surprised, fear, this doesn't really fall into any display of emotion. I'm not looking at this and going, oh, she's feeling some sort of way here. I will throw this in, and Chase, I think you'll agree with this as well, and maybe you could throw in some input. I was talking to Dr. G, who has a wonderful channel on YouTube. Dr. G Explains. If you guys don't watch his stuff, you absolutely should. I'll leave a link in the description. He is a clinical and forensic psychologist, and this is what he said about this. He completely agrees that this was not a random gesture. He's very certain of that. But here's what he said. He said, the actual only time I've ever seen somebody do that in a clinical sense is people with Tourette's do that, but clearly she doesn't have that because there are zero other signs. So that is another category of gestures, I guess, like tics or random things associated to, like involuntary movements.
Yeah.
But we've never seen her. And Chase, you're way more qualified to talk about that kind of thing. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
You see some of these behaviors in people with Tourette's and Parkinson's. And we start losing control of these cranial nerves, especially cranial nerve 7, which is all around this little area of the face. And that's not what this is. You can tell that these muscles are under voluntary control, but that does not mean that the movement of the face is conscious. So those are different things. It's voluntary control, unconscious movement is what I'm saying that it is.
Chase, thank you so much for your input on all this. So valuable. Some great stuff here. Even if it was just one moment, there's a lot of really interesting things to talk about psychologically. Really want to thank you for your input and being here with us today. Happy 4th of July to you and yours, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, brother.
Okay, so there was a few additional thoughts on this. So Chase and I are very much thinking that it was just subconscious mimicry, that she wasn't consciously doing this to condescend him. It also wouldn't make sense that if she chose to do that, that's a big statement, that she would then come out and say, no, I wasn't mocking him. I was just saying thank you to some people in the room. So it's very possible that she turned around to thank people and her mouth subconsciously mimicked something that she knows is very much part of his baseline. Another thing that I really found fascinating that I want to throw in is that in her statement, when she said, oh no, I wasn't mocking him, I just said thank you. Now, granted, nobody pressed her on it, nobody asked more questions. I would have loved to, but in that statement, she didn't address this gesture that millions of people around the world are seeing and comparing to Donald Trump's baseline. She didn't address it at all in any way. She didn't say, oh no, I don't see the resemblance at all. I don't know what people are talking about. She didn't say, oh no, I do see, hey, in my mouth pocket, I don't know why. Nothing. She didn't address it. She sidestepped it completely and just said, oh no, I was just thanking people and didn't mention the gesture. This suggests to me that she kind of might see what some people are seeing, right? Because otherwise she would just go, I have no idea what people are talking about. That's just how my mouth moves. But that wasn't the statement. It was just, no, I wasn't mocking him. I was just saying thank you. So I found it interesting, although it's not like this huge indicator of anything, just interesting that that was her only statement and she didn't address the gesture itself at all. So yeah, I'm calling subconscious mimicry on this one, which is something that we see in the real world all the time. When we're connecting with someone, we might talk the way they do, at their pace, we might move the way they do a little bit. Sometimes you're talking to someone, their voice cracks and you clear your own throat when their voice cracks. Or yawn contagion. One of the most fascinating things in psychology is yawn contagion. When we see someone yawn and we yawn ourselves, it causes us to yawn. I do this in my seminars very often, to where I randomly yawn, a fake yawn at some point, and a whole bunch of people in the audience yawn as a result. And this goes right back to what Chase was saying about mirror neurons, connecting with someone, and because of that connection, we mirror what they're doing. In fact, this is a really good test in social settings to see if you have someone's attention, whether that's a positive thing or not so positive. So let's say you're at a bar or a party and you want to know if that certain someone has their eye on you. Or in a not so positive scenario, let's say you're on a bus or something in a public setting and you have a feeling that someone's paying a little too much attention to you. Try it. Try a fake yawn and see what happens. If nothing happens, that's not a conclusion, because obviously this isn't a 100% type thing. But if they do yawn, that's a pretty good indication that you've got their attention. whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And this all just relates to mirror neurons and social mimicry, which is what we think is happening here. Let me know in the comments what you think is happening here, whether it's with the Elon Musk thing or with the Queen Maxima situation. Do you agree with us that it's a subconscious mirroring? Do you think that it was a purposeful mockery in front of the cameras? Or do you think it was just this random gesture? But if that's what you think, please let me know in that same comment what you think this random gesture is. Because if you just go, no, just random gesture, nothing this here, I'm gonna be angry because I wanna know exactly what would cause such a random thing. I won't be able to sleep at night. So let me know in the comments and I will see you on the next one.